The silver chime rang softly from the door of the Golden Fork restaurant, carrying with it the scent of wine and the lively footsteps of a Friday night. Mary Lopez briskly wiped down the counter, her slender hands moving with the practiced rhythm of someone long accustomed to the job. Her bright brown eyes glimmered as they scanned the crystal glasses, catching the chandelier's glow, and inside her rose a strange stirring and intuition she could not name. "Mary, table 12 is asking for you again?" "Carmen," her close colleague whispered teasingly, her lips curling into a sly smile. Mary froze. Table 12. That man! For 3 months, he had appeared every weekend night, always ordering an expensive red wine that few dared to request. A tall man with a commanding posture, his cold gaze carried an almost irresistible pull. James Smith. The name had never been spoken aloud, at least not publicly. But Mary had heard the staff's whispers, seen the way wealthy patrons sneaked glances at him with a mix of wariness and curiosity. A powerful billionaire. A man too dangerous to approach, yet too compelling to look away from. Mary drew a deep breath and smoothed her apron. She knew she had to keep her distance. She was just an ordinary girl, motherless, weighed down by leftover tuition debt and the grind of survival. James's world, no matter how dazzling, did not belong to her. But hearts rarely obey reason. Mary walked toward table 12. James Smith looked up, his gray eyes cool as an approaching storm. For a heartbeat, she felt as though he could read every pulse of her heart. "Good evening, Mr. Smith," she said softly, her polite smile slipping on like a familiar mask. "Would you like your usual?" James gave a slight nod, the corner of his mouth curving, as if pleased to hear his name from her lips. The gesture sent a shiver down Mary's spine, not from fear, but from another more dangerous sensation, an inexplicable pull. As she poured the wine, her hand trembled slightly, the crimson liquid reflecting both their faces for an instant. James watched her every move with quiet intensity, as if even the tilt of her wrist was worth studying. "You seem distracted." His voice was deep, warm, yet laced with authority. Mary flushed, glancing away. "No, sir, just a busy night." He said nothing, only set down his glass, his eyes never leaving hers. In that moment, the bustling restaurant seemed to fade, leaving only his gaze. But Mary's intuition, honed from years of studying criminal psychology, suddenly blared like an alarm. A man at table 8 had been sitting for an hour, ordering 3 cocktails, but drinking none. Another lingered at the bar, eyes discreetly scanning every exit. Near the restroom, a younger man drummed his fingers on the table, his gaze tense. A chill swept over Mary. All of them were watching table 12. She gripped the tray tighter, heart pounding. Could it all be a coincidence? Or was a trap being set? Mary James tilted his head slightly. "Something on your mind?" She swallowed, forcing her voice steady. "I think you should stay a little longer. Don't leave yet." He arched an eyebrow, his eyes flashing sharply. "Why?" Lowering her voice, she leaned closer, her heart rattling at her boldness. "3 men are watching you. They're not here for dinner." For an instant, James went still. Then very slowly he set down his glass, his gaze shifting from storm gray to steel. A faint curve touched his lips, a smile both cold and dangerous. "Thank you, Mary," he murmured. "You've just changed our entire evening." She had no time to process his words before 3 men in black suits emerged from the restaurant's shadows. They moved so quickly she barely blinked, one pinned to the table. Another cuffed at the bar, the third vanished into the dim corridor near the restrooms. It happened in seconds. Most patrons barely noticed, assuming it was some drunken scuffle. But Mary knew this was no ordinary scene. James sat still, lifting his glass like a king, watching his pieces fall into place. "Come with me," he said as he rose, his eyes a command. "Now." Mary stepped back, alarmed. "I'm still on shift. Your shift is over. Trust me, you don't want to be here when the police arrive." He placed a light hand on her back, warm enough to make her heartbeat falter, firm enough to leave no room for refusal. Outside, a luxury car waited, engine purring. Mary hesitated. Every instinct screamed this was the start of a path with no return. But those gray eyes, dangerous, enigmatic, held her fast. She stepped inside. The door closed, darkness and leather enveloping her. James sat beside her in silence, his presence filling the space. Mary swallowed, whispering, "Where are you taking me?" James turned his low voice, sending a shiver down her spine. "To a place where you'll understand why you should never walk away from me." Through the flickering streetlights of Chicago, Mary glimpsed the woman in the front seat, black eyes cold, watching her in the rearview mirror. The woman's lips curved into a slow, mysterious smile. "Welcome, Mary," she said softly. "He's been waiting for you a long time." The luxury car's engine purred as it glided along the night-lit boulevard, Chicago's city lights flashing past the windows like fragments of a restless dream. Mary sat silent, hands clasped to steady her trembling. Beside her, James Smith remained motionless, his high-bridged nose and stone-cast face unreadable. The woman in the front seat, who had greeted Mary with that knowing smile, stayed silent too, occasionally glancing at her through the mirror. The car's cabin was suffocatingly quiet. Mary's heartbeat drummed in her ears, starkly contrasting their absolute composure. She couldn't hold back anymore. "Mr. Smith, what is this? Who is she?" The woman's lips curved slightly, answering for him. "I'm Sophia Romano, James's assistant." Assistant, Mary echoed, half confused, half bitter. "An assistant who knows my name and says he's been waiting for me?" James finally turned, his gray eyes locking onto hers, silencing every question. His voice was calm, but each word heavy as stone. "You saved me tonight. That means your life can no longer stay the same." Mary gave a shaky laugh. "You mean I don't have a choice?" "Not precisely," James said softly, his eyes momentarily gentling. "But if you turn your back, you'll become a target. Those men you saw tonight, they won't stop." The words landed like a verdict. She had saved him, and the price was her own safety. The car pulled up to a gleaming tower, its glass facade reflecting the city's bright sprawl. Inside, luxury pressed down like a weight, marble floors, cold underfoot, a high ceiling glimmering with crystal light. Men in dark suits bowed to James, their eyes sharp as blades. Sophia led Mary into a private elevator. The confined space hummed as the lift rose, each floor clicking past. James stood close enough for Mary to feel his warmth, yet far enough for her to feel no safety. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, mustering courage. "To the only place you won't be killed," James replied curtly. When the doors opened, the penthouse unfurled like another world. Glass walls drenched in Chicago's night, exquisite furnishings blending art and power. Yet Mary felt no beauty, only the chill of a fortress dressed in luxury. Sophia departed, leaving them alone. Mary turned to face James. "I can't stay here. I have work friends." Handled, James cut in, voice firm. "Carmen thinks you had food poisoning." The restaurant owner accepted an explanation. "No one suspects." Mary stared. "You planned this? You knew about me before tonight." James stepped closer, each pace shrinking the space between them until only a breath remained. He bent slightly, his gray eyes piercing hers, melting every protest in the air. "Because, Mary, I've been watching you for a long time." The words fell like a blade, chilling her skin while tangling her heart. Ding. Why? A billionaire like him, with thousands of women around, had chosen to watch a mere server. Mary stepped back, chest tight. What is this, a powerful, mysterious billionaire taking an interest in a girl with nothing? "Why me?" James didn't answer immediately. He poured himself a drink, then replied slowly. "Because you see what others miss. The way an enemy's hand trembles, the way their breathing shifts. You can read people, and tonight that saved my life." Mary fell silent. The skills she'd learned in school, the unconscious observations she'd made at work, had somehow become the reason for his attention. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. Every sound in the lavish apartment made her flinch. She stood at the glass wall, staring at the city below her mind, in turmoil. All she had wanted was an ordinary life, work, repay her debts, live quietly. But now she'd been dragged into a whirlpool of power she never sought. Behind her, James approached. No footsteps, but his presence was unmistakable. He stopped just behind her, speaking softly. "You think you're trapped. But the truth is, you're safer here than anywhere else." Mary turned, her brown eyes conflicted. "And what if I don't want safety like this?" James was silent for a beat, then smiled faintly, a smile equal parts challenge and confession. Then you'll have to choose between freedom and survival. Sophia handed Mary an elegant dress to replace her familiar uniform the next morning. Mr. Smith wants you at breakfast. Mary held the dress, her heart quivering. This wasn't just a change of clothes. It was a sign she was about to cross into another life. A life where every choice might cost her the one thing she still owned herself. When she entered the dining room, James was already in a simple white shirt that lit up the room. He looked up smiling lightly, a rare smile. Sit, Mary. From now on, you won't just be a waitress. You'll be the person I need by my side. Mary sat, hiding the storm within her. She knew this breakfast wasn't the start of a day, it was the start of a life. At that moment, she realized the cruelest twist from James's savior. She had become a piece he could never remove from his board. Here's a polished, faithful English translation of your text, keeping its suspense rhythm and emotional weight, while ensuring correct spelling and grammar. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the massive glass windows of the penthouse, casting a soft golden sheen across the marble floor. Mary sat motionless at the dining table, her hands clasped around a steaming cup of coffee. In front of her, James Smith sat at ease, turning the pages of the morning paper, as if last night's chaos had been nothing more than a trivial play unworthy of concern. Mary was not used to this silence. At the restaurant, the clinking of cutlery, the lilting music, and the murmur of customers always filled the void. Here, the silence was so dense that breathing too loudly might make her feel out of place. Mr. Smith. Mary began trying to break the invisible wall. James. He cut her off, eyes still on the paper. When it's just the two of us, call me James. Mary faltered for a moment. His name slipping from her lips felt both intimate and foreign. James. I want to understand. Why are there so many people who want you dead? He folded the paper, slowly lifting his silver-gray eyes to meet hers. A glint flickered there, sharp as a blade, yet carrying a sadness he couldn't quite hide. There are some secrets, Mary, he said quietly. Not because I don't want to tell you, but because once you know, you can never go back. The words sent a shiver down her spine. But her heart urged her on. If she'd been drawn into this, she needed to know the truth, no matter how brutal. That night, Mary stood on the balcony, the wind tugging at her hair as the city glowed below. James stepped out, a glass of wine swirling in his hand. He was silent for a long while before speaking, his voice rougher than usual. Did you know? When I was 15, I watched my mother die right in front of me. Mary turned, stunned. He rarely mentioned his family, and now the words cut into the quiet night like a blade. She was poisoned. James continued, his gaze far away. And the one who did it wasn't an enemy out there, but someone in my own family. Someone who once shared our table, who once called my father brother. Mary gripped the railing. The pain he described wasn't just a memory, it was a weight pressing on every breath he took. From that day on, I understood, in this world, the most dangerous person isn't the one who opposes you. It's the one you trust. He gave a faint, cold smile that couldn't mask the wound beneath. And I'll never let history repeat itself. Mary stayed silent, her heart aching. Behind the armor of power stood a boy who had lost everything, forced to grow up in the shadows of betrayal. James, she whispered, her hand brushing his arm without thinking. The warmth spread between them, making him pause. His gray eyes slid over her face, revealing for the first time a flicker of vulnerability. The next day, Sophia handed Mary a thin file. Mr. Smith wants you to see this. Inside was a photo of a young man so familiar that Mary's breath caught. Jimmy, the delivery boy, who often stopped by Golden Fork, always smiling kindly, asking after her studies. He's dead, Mary's voice shook, splintering. Sophia nodded faintly. He worked for Mr. Smith's enemies. He sold them information about you. His death was unavoidable. Mary stared at the photo, the image of Jimmy's bright smile clashing with the cold, lifeless picture in the file. But he was just an ordinary person. Did it have to end like this? Sophia's voice was calm, almost chilling. There is no such thing as an ordinary person once they choose the wrong side. Every decision carries a price. Mary set the file down, her chest heavy. For the first time, she truly felt the razor-thin line between innocent and traitor in James's world. That night, suffocating under the weight of it all, Mary slipped into the hallway to catch her breath. Suddenly, she heard low voices from the room across. "She's not like the others. If she stays too long, Mary will become your weakness." It was Sophia's voice. A pause. Then James's deep and firm, "I know. But I'd rather have that weakness than lose what was once precious to me again." Mary's heart jolted. The confession wasn't meant for her, but it pierced her anyway. The cold, ruthless man had just admitted she was his weakness. She leaned back against the wall, her brown eyes glistening in the dark. She didn't know whether to feel joy or fear, because being the weakness of a powerful man meant carrying a terrible price. The next morning, James took Mary to an exclusive restaurant, no other guests, just the two. He sat across from her, his gaze more serious than usual. "Mary, you need to understand something," he said slowly. "If you choose to stay with me, you'll never have your old life again. Friends' freedom, simple workdays, all will be gone. In its place, you'll have power, protection, and danger at every turn." Mary stayed silent, torn. Part of her longed for a quiet, peaceful love, but another part was drawn to those gray eyes that held both darkness and a desperate need for salvation. "And if I refuse?" she asked. James gave a faint smile, not a victor's smile, but of an unhealed wound. "Then you'll disappear, because those hunting me will never spare you." Mary looked at him for a long time. The man before her was the fire that had burned her peace away, and the only shelter from the storm. The truth blurred her vision with tears, but her lips parted with a sentence even she didn't expect. "Then, prove to me I'm not just a weakness. Please give me a reason to stay." James went still, then his gaze softened. He reached for her hand for the first time, not as a command, but with a quiet sincerity he couldn't name. The air in the penthouse that day was taut as a drawn string. Mary sat at the enormous desk, a stack of files Sophia had brought before her. On the cover, the stark words, "Personnel Report, New Recruits." She looked up, her brown eyes still tinged with doubt. "You want me to read this?" James stood by the window, his back straight, his shadow stretching across the marble floor. He didn't look at her, only nodded. "You studied criminal psychology. I want you to observe. Tell me who can be trusted and who cannot." A shiver ran through Mary. This was no longer a game. He was drawing her fully into his world, where a single decision could make someone vanish from life. "James," she said softly, her voice trembling. "What if I'm wrong? What if an innocent person?" He turned, his gray eyes cold as steel, but his voice unexpectedly gentle. "In my world, a mistake doesn't just cost one life. It can kill your family, it can kill me. You can't be wrong, but I trust you." The last words choked her heart. "I trust you," a rare admission, both a bind and a gift. All afternoon, Mary pored over the files. The faces of the candidates stared back from photos and sterile details. Age, employment history, family ties. But it wasn't the numbers that held her. It was the small things, eyes that avoided the camera, a habit of biting one's lip in an interview, evasive answers about the past. From across the room, Sophia watched a flicker of surprise in her sharp gaze. Mary wasn't just reading, she was analyzing, weaving together details, exposing hidden cracks. When she finally looked up, night had fallen. She handed James 3 names. The first 2 show signs of concealment. The third isn't loyal. He's only faithful to money. James took the papers silently, his expression unreadable. After a moment, he gave a rare smile, not cold, but tinged with pride. "See, you're not just a weakness. You just helped me eliminate 3 future traitors." Mary's heart tightened. She'd done the right thing. Yet a chill spread through her. A single sentence from her now could decide another person's fate. That night, Mary sat alone in the living room, city lights casting her shadow long and quiet. One half felt acknowledged inside her, and the other trembled at the power she'd accidentally touched. James approached, carrying 2 cups of espresso. He set one before her. "Thank you, Mary." She looked up, startled. "You thank me?" "Yes. You've crossed into my world. I didn't want you to, but you've proven you can." He sat beside her close enough for her to hear her own heartbeat. "But James..." Mary's brown eyes glimmered with honesty and confusion. I'm afraid. Afraid that the further I go, the more I'll lose myself. He was silent for a while, then murmured, You're not losing yourself. You're finding another version of you, a stronger version, but also a more fragile one. He reached out, brushing her cheek lightly. The touch was so gentle, her heart trembled. At that moment, she saw clearly behind all his coldness that James was just a man who had lost too much trying to hold on to a sliver of warmth. The next day, James brought Mary to another restaurant, not Golden Fork, but a new venue he'd just invested in. On the surface, it was an upscale Italian restaurant, but Mary quickly noticed the unfamiliar faces, the probing eyes. This is your first test, James whispered in her ear. Just observe, do nothing. Please tell me what you see. Mary took a deep breath and stepped into the warm glow of the chandeliers. Customers were scattered cutlery clinking. But within minutes, she sensed something off. A man in the corner far too tense for his crisp suit. A young woman pretending to be absorbed in her phone, but always watching the bar. And most notably, the new bartender, his gaze evasive, his motions too mechanical. Mary returned to James, leaning close to whisper, 3 people. They're not here for dinner. They're watching the exits, watching you. James gave a slight nod, a smile curving his lips. Good, very good. Moments later, Sophia signaled the security team. Within minutes, the 3 strangers were removed without disruption. Everything returned to normal, as if no danger had been there. Mary sat still, heart pounding. She realized that one small observation from her had shifted the entire board, and James was slowly drawing her into the game. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She stepped onto the balcony, the cold wind rushing over her. James was already there, gazing at the glittering city. You did well, he said softly without turning. Mary joined him. But James, if one day I realize I can't live in this world, will you let me go? James turned, his gray eyes shadowed with night, deep and dangerous. He leaned in his breath, brushing her hair, his voice a quiet confession. You've gone too far to turn back, Mary. But if that day comes, I'll be the one to take you away. Only me. Mary looked up, her heart tight. This man who made others tremble had just spoken a promise that felt fragile yet heavy as stone. She didn't know if it was protection or a sweet curse. The soft strains of piano music drifted across the lavish ballroom of a charity gala, where glittering crystal lights reflected off elegant gowns. Mary walked beside James, wrapped in the emerald green dress Sophia had chosen for her, her bare shoulders trembling slightly under the weight of hundreds of gazes. James held her hand lightly, a touch reassuring yet possessive. He stood at the center of the room's attention, calm smile, in place steel gray eyes commanding nods from men and reverent glances from women. Mary whispered, Are you certain this isn't dangerous? James tilted his head, a cold smile playing on his lips. Mary, everywhere I go is dangerous. The difference is, I know how to turn danger into opportunity. Her heart tightened, fear and strange reassurance intermingling. The first half of the gala unfolded smoothly. Mary tried to blend into small conversations, sipping sparkling champagne. Yet her instincts, the same that had once saved James at Golden Fork, began to scream. A man in a gray suit lingered too long at the bar, scanning the room instead of his drink. A woman in a red dress seemed more fixated on James's location than her company. Near the entrance, 2 men dressed as waitstaff moved with steps too uneven than for professionals. Mary leaned close to James. Something's wrong. At least 3 people don't belong here. He showed no surprise. His grip tightened around her hand, his gray eyes hardening to ice. You did well. Stay with me. Whatever happens, don't let go. Moments later, the chandelier lights abruptly died. Glass shattered. Chaos erupted. Gunfire ripped through the unfinished piano melody. Mary gasped, but James was already pulling her down behind a banquet table, shielding her with his body. Screams, shouts, the stampede of terrified guests in tuxedos and gowns filled the air. James. Mary clutched his arm, her heart hammering. He bent close, eyes flashing in the dark. Silence. Listen to me. He drew a small handgun from his jacket, swift, steady, unfaltering. Mary trembled but could not look away. Amid the chaos, he was the only unshakable pillar. Shadows stormed in through the main doors. Not guests, but armed intruders. They fired into the ceiling, the deafening cracks silencing the crowd. "No one leaves," a hoarse voice shouted. Mary cowered, her pulse on the verge of breaking, but James leaned close, his whisper firm. "Trust me, Mary. I'll get you out." In that moment, she realized her terror wasn't for the bullets, it was the thought of losing James. He pulled her through the panicked crowd, weaving past smoke and spilled wine. His movements were swift, his presence so commanding that attackers hesitated to approach him. As they neared a side exit, a disguised waiter spotted them, gun flashing in his hand. Mary screamed instinctively. In an instant, James spun, wrapping Mary in his arms, his body a steel shield. A bullet tore past, splintering the wooden column behind them. In the same breath, James fired back the muzzle, flashing the man collapsing before he could pull the trigger again. Mary froze wide-eyed. It had happened too fast, yet the feeling of his arms, terrifying and suffocatingly safe, remained. They burst into an empty corridor, neon lights flickering overhead. James gripped her hand tightly, her breath heavy, but her voice eerily calm. "Do you see now? This is my world. Shadows. Blood enemies always lurking. Do you still want to stay with me?" Mary's eyes shimmered. She trembled but did not pull her hand away. "I'm afraid, James, but I'm more scared of not knowing where you are." He faltered. Amid the chaos, her confession struck him like fire in the dark. James lifted her face, his touch uncharacteristically tender. He kissed her against the backdrop of alarm, smoke, and danger. Their first kiss, born in fire, and bullets fierce, desperate, yet burning with the will to live. Mary closed her eyes, surrendering to her heart. Right and wrong, safe and dangerous ceased to matter in that moment. Only one truth remained: she needed him. When they parted, breath mingling, James whispered, "From this moment, you're no longer an outsider. You're mine, Mary, and I'll protect you even if the whole world stands against me." Tears streamed down Mary's cheeks. She knew a promise in James's world carried the weight of life and death, and she had crossed a line from which there was no return. The next morning, the media swarmed with reports of a mysterious attack at the gala. Details were scarce, blurry images of guests fleeing, fragments of panic. James Smith's name surfaced amid speculation. Some called him an influential businessman. Others sneered, branding him a king of the underworld. Mary read the headlines, her heart reeling. She knew her own name might soon be on their list. But when she looked up and met James's gaze, resolute yet softened just for her, she understood her choice was already made. The storm of the gala had barely passed before new waves came crashing. In the brightly lit penthouse, Mary sat on the couch, hands trembling, as she scrolled through relentless headlines on her phone. Billionaire James Smith tied to chaos at charity gala. A night of elegance turned battlefield. Every word, every speculation cut into her like invisible blades. Outside, the city carried on, but each headline screamed one truth for Mary: she could never go back. James entered unshaken, as though untouched by it all. He shed his suit jacket, clad only in a plain white shirt. Yet Mary knew beneath the calm exterior beat a heart braced against countless enemies. "You've been reading the news." His voice was low, husky. Mary lifted damp eyes. "They call you a criminal, the man behind it all." "James, who am I supposed to believe?" He paused, his silver-gray gaze flickering with pride and pain. Kneeling before her, he clasped her hands. "Believe me. Believe what you see in my eyes, not what the press fabricates." His eyes were sharp as blades, yet trembling in a way she had never seen. Vulnerable. And in that moment, she held his hands tighter, not letting go. But chaos allowed no pause. That evening, a frantic knock rattled the door. A security guard rushed in, face pale, Mr. Smith. "The lower security system's been breached. They're inside." Before Mary could react, the lights died, the penthouse sinking into dim emergency glow. Sirens wailed, freezing her blood. James rose sharply, pulling a hidden gun from a compartment. His eyes turned to the steel, but his voice to Mary remained unexpectedly gentle. "Listen to me, Mary. Stay close. Whatever happens, don't let go. Understand?" She nodded hard, her heart tearing at her ribs. Boots thundered from the stairwell. The metal doors below burst open, and men in black flooded in like a dark tide. Their intent was clear: Kill James Smith. Sophia appeared with 2 guards, gun in hand, eyes sharp as knives. Torino's men. He won't stop. Mary's blood chilled. Ricardo Torino, the whispered name from scattered conversations, was now real, his presence marked by the muzzles of guns. James pulled her behind a marble wall as bullets screamed past. Mary squeezed her eyes shut, lungs gasping. Amid the chaos, James's voice rang out firm. "Don't be afraid. Look at me, only me." She opened her eyes. Through the haze of gunfire and smoke, his gray eyes stood as the only anchor. One attacker lunged too close. Instinctively, Mary grabbed a crystal vase from the table and smashed it against his head. The crash startled everyone. James instantly finished the man, then looked back at her, eyes sparking with something unexpected. "Well done, you just saved us both." Mary panted, stunned at herself. But in his gaze, she saw for the first time not just cold admiration, but pride. The battle raged for nearly half an hour. Gunfire, shouts, shattering glass, chaos composed a brutal symphony. Finally, as James's reinforcements arrived, Torino's men withdrew, leaving devastation in their wake. Mary collapsed onto the floor, trembling uncontrollably and as stained with blood, not hers, but another's. James knelt before her, gently taking her hands. He said nothing, only steadied her with his eyes. Mary broke down sobbing. "I didn't want to kill anyone, James. I want to live." He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if afraid to lose her in that very instant. "You didn't kill. You survived. And Mary, I swear I'll never let anyone touch you again." In his embrace, she felt both fragile and unbreakable. She didn't know if it was a vow or just his way of convincing himself. But she believed that he meant every word, at least now. When dawn broke, sunlight streamed through shattered glass, painting James's weary yet unyielding face. Mary looked at him, realizing the distance between them had closed not only from circumstance, but because her heart had truly moved. Yet deep inside, fear lingered. Was this love her salvation? Or the beginning of a greater tragedy? She whispered, her voice hanging heavy in the air. "If one day I become the reason you lose everything, will you regret letting me stay?" James lifted his gaze, his silver gray eyes reflecting the first light of day. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he pressed a kiss to her forehead, tender, haunting. "No, Mary. My only regret would be losing you." The penthouse was silent after the night of chaos. Bloodstains had been scrubbed clean, shattered glass cleared away, yet the echo of the attack lingered like a ghost. Mary sat by the window, gazing at the distant lights of Chicago. Her hands still trembled at the memory of gunfire. Flashes of light, ragged breaths, and James's arms wrapped tightly around her. Inside, James was speaking with Sophia, his voice low and rough. From afar, Mary caught fragments. Torino, revenge, alliance. Each word confirmed what she feared. She was trapped in a storm without escape. James emerged, tension shadowing his silver gray eyes. But when they met hers, the chill softened instantly. He approached and set a hand on her shoulder. "Are you all right?" Mary slightly nodded, though she knew the truth was the opposite. "I'm just not used to it." He held her gaze for a moment, then squeezed her shoulder gently. "You will be, because I need you by my side." Her heart raced at his words. But before she could answer, the doorbell rang, shattering the fragile silence. Sophia opened it. A woman stepped inside. Mary's breath caught. She was stunning, sleek black hair, eyes deep as midnight, the poised elegance of someone born to power. Yet what unsettled Mary most was how James looked at her, surprised and tinged with something unnameable. "Isabella." James whispered, his voice hollow, as if the air had been pulled from him. Mary froze. The name struck her like a blade. Isabella, like the mother he had once told her about. But this woman was no mother. The woman's lips curved in a sharp smile. "It's been a long time, James. I heard you were in trouble. So I came back." The air grew heavy. Sophia bowed slightly, as though Isabella's presence was no surprise. Mary forced composure, though her heart pounded. She looked to James, waiting for an explanation. But he stood silent, eyes locked on Isabella, as if caught by a ghost of his past. Dinner that evening was suffocatingly quiet. Isabella sat across from Mary, every gesture radiating the confidence of someone who knew her place in James's world. "Chicago hasn't changed," Isabella said, her voice smooth yet imperious. "But you have. You're no longer the ambitious young man I once knew." Mary set down her knife, lips tightening. "I'm sorry you are—" Isabella turned her gaze cold, touched with pity. "I was James's fiancée." The glass in Mary's hand trembled. Pain pierced her chest, sharp and deep. Fiancé James had never said. She looked at him. James frowned slightly but didn't deny it. He only said quietly, "That was the past, Mary. The past." Two words that cut deeper than any bullet. Late at night, Mary stepped onto the balcony, heart tangled with fear and confusion. James followed, draping his coat over her shoulders. "Don't think about Isabella. She and I ended long ago." Mary turned, her eyes rimmed red. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" He was silent for a moment, then sighed. "Because it's a past I wanted to bury. Isabella betrayed me. She allied with my enemies. I thought I'd erased it all, but now she's returned." Mary heard him, but her heart was unsettled. The way James had looked at Isabella earlier was not only hatred. It was more profound regret, perhaps, or an unhealed wound. The next morning, Mary awoke to find Isabella speaking calmly with Sophia. When their eyes met, Isabella's smile was sharp. "Do you genuinely think you belong in this world?" Isabella asked softly, her tone laced with mockery. Mary stilled but refused to falter. "I don't know where I belong, but I know James needs me." Isabella's smile widened faintly, her gaze drifting toward James's office door. "Are you sure James once told me the exact words many years ago?" Mary's heart lurched. Isabella was not only the past, she was a crack that could fracture Mary's fragile present. That evening, James summoned Mary to his study. His tone was more serious than usual. "Torino is building strength. He's just allied with a cartel from Mexico. I have to leave Chicago for a few days to deal with it. You'll stay here. Sophia and the security team will protect you." Mary bit her lip. With Isabella, James faltered, then tightened his grip on her hand. "Mary, look at me. You're the only one I choose. But the past isn't easily erased." The half-truth left her aching. For the first time, she felt herself balanced on a fragile wire. One side was new love, the other. James's dark past, Isabella, its living shadow. That night, after James had gone, Mary stood before the mirror, asking herself, could she endure? Could she hold on to this man? Or would his past devour her? A knock came at the door. Mary opened it. Isabella stood there, her face softened with impossible gentleness. "We need to talk," she murmured. "Just the two of us." Mary shivered. In Isabella's fathomless eyes, she glimpsed a secret that could change everything. The penthouse lay under an unusual stillness. James had left Chicago to confront the Torino alliance. Only Mary, Sophia, and Isabella remained. Mary entered the living room. Isabella sat gracefully in an armchair, legs crossed, her poise so natural, it seemed the home belonged to her. The lamplight caught her dark eyes, making her beauty more haunting than ever. "Thank you for coming," Isabella said softly, her voice smooth but edged. "It's time you knew a few truths. James will never tell you, but I will." Mary trembled slightly but steadied herself. "What do you want from me, Isabella?" "Why are you here?" Isabella smiled, lips curving with cold elegance. "I didn't come back to reclaim James. I came back for blood." Mary's breath caught. Isabella rose, stepping to the glass wall, her silhouette sharp against the city's glow. "My brother," she whispered, "died in a purge James ordered 3 years ago. Back then, James and I were still engaged. I knew nothing until I found my brother's final letter." Mary's heart clenched. "You mean James killed your brother?" "He didn't pull the trigger. But in James's world, giving orders is the same as killing." Isabella turned, her eyes ablaze with grief and fury. "I once hated him enough to want to shoot him myself. But I didn't, because if James died, it would only end in more blood. So I chose to disappear. But now, with Torino stirring the old feud, I had no choice but to return." Mary staggered under the revelation. She had thought she understood James's world, but this was only the tip of the iceberg. Isabella stepped closer, eyes piercing into Mary's soul. "Do you really think James belongs to you? He once promised me word for word what he's promised you. Mary, James loves you the same way he once loved me. But one day when the world forces his hand, he will choose power." Mary bit her lip, fighting tears. "I don't believe that." Isabella's laugh was soft, sharp. "Don't believe me? Then why has he never told you about me, about my brother, about the blood on his hands?" Mary fell silent. Doubt shook her faith. Yet the pain in Isabella's eyes made it impossible to hate her. This woman, proud as she was, had once been James's victim too. That night, Mary couldn't sleep. She paced the vast room, questions gnawing at her. James, the man who had held her in fire and promised protection, was he truly someone she could trust with her heart? A soft knock broke her thoughts. Sophia entered carrying warm milk. "You shouldn't stay up so late. You'll break down." Mary looked at her, pleading. "Sophia, is Isabella telling the truth? Did James kill her brother?" Sophia froze, then sighed. "In this world, Mary, no one is innocent, and no decision is simple. James chose between his family and a man who might betray him. That's all." Mary shivered. The half-answer left her even more adrift. The next morning, Mary received a message from James. "I'll be back before midnight. Don't leave the house." She read it again and again, torn between comfort and unease. Part of her wanted to trust, but Isabella's voice echoed, "One day he'll choose power over you." Mary stepped out onto the balcony for air and froze. Below in the garden, Isabella stood speaking with a man cloaked in shadow. The darkness hid his face, but Mary glimpsed a tattoo on his neck, one James had warned her of the mark of the Mexican cartel. Her chest tightened. Why was Isabella meeting with the enemy? That night James returned. Exhaustion clung to him, but his eyes lit when he saw her. He drew her close, kissing her hair as if to erase every distance. Mary trembled, whispering, "James, if there's something you've never told me, please say it now." He paused, meeting her eyes. "I never told you because I was afraid you'd leave. My past isn't clean. But Mary, everything I've done was to protect the people I love." She wanted to believe him, yet the image of Isabella whispering with the cartel burned in her mind. Later, as James retreated to his study, Mary found Isabella waiting in the hallway. "You saw, didn't you?" Isabella said softly, her eyes glinting. "James isn't the savior you think. He destroyed my family, and now he will kill you." Mary clenched her fists, her heart pounding. "What are you doing with the cartel?" Isabella was silent for a long moment, then tilted her head, her smile dark. "I only want James to pay. And if I must use you to bring him down, then forgive me, Mary, you're just another pawn." Mary's eyes widened, her pulse racing. She couldn't tell whether it was the truth or a lie anymore. Isabella, once James's fiancée, was now the woman holding the secret that could shatter everything. Mary sat on the long sofa in the living room, her heart torn like fabric ripped apart. Isabella's words still echoed in her mind. "If I have to use you to bring him down, then forgive me. Mary, you're nothing more than a pawn." The penthouse felt colder than usual. James was still in his study, unaware of the silent battle between the two women. Sophia remained impenetrable like a wall of stone revealing nothing. Mary felt trapped between two worlds. On one side, James, with his love and promise of protection. On the other, Isabella with a past steeped in betrayal and blood. She closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "Who can I trust?" That night, James stepped out of his study, his face tense. He sat beside her, taking her hand. "Tomorrow I'll meet Torino. This is the final chance to end it. But I'm worried about you. You must stay here. Don't go anywhere." Mary looked into his eyes, where the lamplight reflected silver fragments, cold and sharp. "James, if you had to choose between power and me, which would it be?" The question made him freeze. Silence hung for a moment before he squeezed her hand firmly. "I choose you. But to keep you, I need power. Without it, everything would be taken from us." Mary shivered. It wasn't the absolute you she longed for, but a fragile balance between two blades. Another crack formed inside her heart. The next morning, unease gnawed at her. In the hallway, she overheard Isabella speaking quietly with a bodyguard. When Mary appeared, the conversation ended abruptly. Isabella only smiled faintly. Sometimes, Mary, the true enemy, isn't the one in front of us. It's the one we love. Mary bit her lip and walked away, but the words stayed lodged in her mind, like grit in the eye, small, sharp, impossible to ignore. That evening, James took Mary to a private dinner in an exclusive restaurant, not a grand gala, just a quiet meeting with a few associates. But the moment they entered, Mary sensed the heaviness in the air. The stares, the cold handshakes, all of it reeked of danger. While James conversed with his partners, Mary passed by a side table and caught a hushed exchange. Tonight it ends. Torino has someone inside. When the clock strikes 11, Smith won't be a problem anymore. Mary's heart seized. She looked up and across the room. Isabella's eyes met hers. Isabella's lips curved in a thin smile as if confirming every word. Mary rushed back to James, tugging his hand under the table. "James, they're planning to kill you." "Tonight." James frowned, but his gaze was steady without fear. He only nodded slightly, whispering, "I know." Mary staggered. "You know? And still came here." His hand rose to her cheek, eyes blazing with resolve. "Because if I don't face them, they'll never stop. But with you here, I must win no matter the cost." At that instant, an explosion thundered from the kitchen. The restaurant plunged into chaos. Shadows drew guns, bullets ripped through the air. James dragged Mary under the table as gunfire whistled overhead. Sophia and the guards stormed forward, firing back. Mary trembled, but instead of pure fear, a surge of determination flooded her. "I can't let James fall." Her mind flashed to her training in psychology, to the subtle signals she had learned to notice. In the smoke and confusion, one man in the far corner stood out, sweating profusely, handshaking, though he hadn't yet fired the hesitant trigger. Mary lunged forward, knocking over his chair and exposing him. In that split second, James turned and fired, striking the leader before he could raise his weapon. The tide of battle shifted. James guided Mary through the back door into the icy night wind when the chaos subsided. She gasped for breath, still clinging to him. "You saved me again?" James whispered, his forehead pressed to hers. "I owe you more than my life." Tears welled in Mary's eyes, spilling freely. But behind them, Isabella appeared, her gaze as sharp as a blade. "Don't think this battle is over, James," she said, her voice like steel. "The past always demands its price, and Mary will watch you pay it." Mary spun around, shouting through tears, "Isabella, enough. If he hurt you, take it out on him, but leave me out." Isabella studied her silently, then gave a sorrowful smile. "You don't understand, Mary. Loving a man like James means you've already become part of the game. And this game never has a winner." With that, she turned and disappeared into the night. Mary clung to James, her heart in turmoil. Between the woman of his past, burning with vengeance, and herself uncertain, trembling yet resolute, James stood at the center, and she was caught in the whirlpool with him. Later that night, James set his glass of wine down in the penthouse, his eyes shadowed with darkness. "Mary, you have to choose. Either trust me, or leave now before it's too late." Mary stepped closer, wrapping her arms tightly around him, whispering, "I chose long ago. But James, please don't let our love become another blade." He held her as if she might vanish from his arms. Yet Mary knew the real battle hadn't even begun. And when it did, she would be standing between two blades, one forged of love, the other of shadows she could never escape. If you enjoyed this chapter, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next twist in James and Mary's story.